Welcome to Dreamy Tales, a place where gentle, relaxing stories will guide you into a deep sleep. On this channel, we'll be sharing soothing stories to help you unwind and forget the worries of the day. If you enjoy these peaceful moments, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you won't miss any of our bedtime tales. Let's create a space of relaxation together each night. Now, before we dive into tonight's story, let's take a few moments to relax your body and mind. Find a comfortable spot to sit or lie down. Gently close your eyes and take a deep breath. Inhale slowly, feeling the fresh air filling your lungs, and slowly exhale, letting the tension in your body gradually melt away. Repeat this 3 more times. With each breath, feel yourself becoming more relaxed and ready to enter the magical world of stories. Now, loosen your shoulders, gently massage your face, and release any remaining tension. Pay attention to any areas in your body that still feel tight, maybe in your neck, back, or legs, and gently let them relax. Next, we'll do a short guided visualization. Imagine yourself in a beautiful garden under the night sky, with the soft moonlight shining down. You can hear the rustling of leaves in the breeze, the sound of water flowing gently in the distance. Feel the cool breeze brushing against your face. Now that your body and mind are relaxed, let's step into tonight's story. But before we begin, remind yourself that you deserve these moments of relaxation, and let go of all worries as you listen to each word. And now, as you are fully relaxed, let's begin our journey into tonight's tale. Allow my words to guide you into a world of dreams and serenity. Relax and listen slowly, nestled beyond an old rural village, where cobblestone cottages lined meandering streets and the soft toll of the church bell once signaled the passing hours. There sprawled a thick woodland. This woodland seemed unremarkable at first glance, a mere congregation of towering pine trees, rippling ferns, and the occasional footpath that hikers would follow on crisp autumn weekends. Yet, in the depths of these woods lay a secret realm few ever imagined, a diminutive kingdom tended by fluttering fairies, creatures as ancient few locals could claim to have seen this hidden village. In hushed corners of the local tavern, or perhaps when families gathered around the fire on cold evenings, whispered tales of mystical guardians floated to small sprites who Mother Nature's most trusted caretakers. The forest protected them. Occasionally, though, someone stumbled upon the threshold of that wonderland, as if invited by fate. Perhaps the forest let its guard down for a fleeting moment, or perhaps it sensed a special heart worthy of this secret. Most who set foot on those hidden paths did so without planning. They were neither hunters nor explorers. They were simply drawn to the deeper parts of the woodland by an inexplicable pull. And so, once every few years, maybe less, a humble visitor found themselves unexpectedly in the presence of the forest's tiniest denizens. That happened on a day that began unremarkably when Dahlia took her usual autumn walk. Dahlia was a gentle-hearted girl in her early teens who lived in a modest house on the outskirts of the village. She had brown hair that tumbled in waves around her shoulders and curious eyes that brightened whenever she found herself outdoors. Dahlia's mother, Marina, was a kind soul who taught her the importance of appreciating the little things in life. Thanks to her mother's patient guidance, Dahlia had learned to love every season, but autumn had always been her favorite. From the very first day the leaves started turning golden, Dahlia's spirit seemed to come alive in a fresh, vibrant way. She delighted in everything about harvest time. the taste of pumpkin pies fresh from the oven, the crackle of leaves beneath her feet, and the tapestry of color that spread across treetops, as if every leaf had been hand-painted by an artist in the sky. Whenever her mother burned a cinnamon-scented candle, Dahlia would breathe in, close her eyes, and imagine a magical festival swirling through the crisp air. That particular afternoon, the air smelled of pine and damp bark. The skies were shaded a gentle gray, with the layers of misty clouds seemingly designed to veil the sun. Yet slivers of sunlight still snuck between them, illuminating patches of earth in a graceful dance of light and shadow. Dahlia wrapped herself in a warm scarf, one her grandmother had knitted in a swirl of soft autumn hues, deep orange, warm cream, and a bit of russet red. She tugged the scarf snugly around her neck and stepped into the forest, intending to lose herself among the trees for an hour or two. Before she set off, Marina had called to her from the front door. "Be safe, Dahlia. And don't wander too far." Dahlia reassured her mother with a nod and a promise to be back in time for dinner. With each crunch of her boots on the trail that led into the woodland's heart, she felt a sense of wonder. It was as though the forest recognized her, like an old friend greeting her with the hush of leaves and the lullaby of rustling branches. Deep among the towering oaks and maples, Dahlia began to notice that the usual forest route she followed every autumn felt somehow different. The trees seemed to align themselves a bit more closely, their branches weaving overhead like the ribs of a cathedral made of wood and leaves. She could hear the rhythmic drop of moisture from the high canopies, little droplets shimmering as they fell onto the moss-laden ground. Sometimes she'd spot a chipmunk scurrying along a fallen log, or hear the echoing caw of a distant crow. These were normal woodland happenings, yet Dahlia sensed an undercurrent of something more, something magical, lapping at the edges of her awareness. Her feet led her deeper than usual. She paid little attention to how far she was going because her eyes were fixed on the vivid oranges and yellows overhead. She loved the way the leaves above seemed to catch stray beams of sunlight and glow like polished gold. She felt as if a painter had splashed warm pigments across the sky. Meanwhile, the ground underfoot gradually shifted from soil and broken twigs to a smoother terrain. At first, she scarcely noticed. Her mind was busy marveling at the towering red maples and the gentle swirl of falling leaves around her ankles. Then she realized that her footsteps no longer crunched. Instead, they made a soft, tapping sound. Startled, Dahlia looked down. Gone were the earthy browns and greens of forest floor. Instead, she discovered she was standing on a cobblestone walkway. It was a narrow path of neatly arranged stones, each one worn and rounded by time. On either side, walls of red maples stood like silent guards, their leaves rustling in a breeze that felt a touch warmer than the rest of the forest. It was as if these maples had formed a private corridor to some hidden place. A hush fell over Dahlia. Her heart fluttered. She glanced behind her, expecting to see the familiar forest trail, but there was no sign of it. The grass, the fallen leaves, the puddles of last night's rain, all had disappeared. In their place were the same tall maples, lining the cobblestone path that stretched behind her, giving no clue where it led or began. She turned back to face forward. A sense of excitement unfurled in her chest. She realized she could either retrace her steps or step further in. Dahlia took a slow breath, inhaling the earthy perfume of pine needles. A stirring in the air seemed to urge her onward. She felt an inner nudge, almost like a voice telling her to follow the stones. She had always loved little adventures, and this certainly felt like one. The forest, ordinarily so predictable, had shifted like a puzzle in the hands of a playful child. And Dahlia, never one to resist a call to wonder, chose to press on. She had only taken a few careful steps when she heard a delicate scuttling. It sounded like tiny feet pattering, but it was so hushed she might have missed it if the forest had not grown so still. Her first thought was that it might be a small animal, perhaps a chipmunk or a mouse skittering across the stones in search of a snack. Then the sound changed. Footsteps, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakably deliberate. Dahlia paused, the mild wind teasing the ends of her hair. Suddenly, something about the size of her finger emerged from beneath a curled red leaf. Dahlia peered closer, her eyes widening in disbelief. It had wings, delicate, semi-translucent wings that caught a hint of the feeble sunlight. At first, she doubted her own eyes. Could the trick of light be creating this vision? All her life, she'd heard childish tales of whimsical creatures flitting about in the forest, but she had long since tucked away those fantasies. But here, perched on the stone walkway, was a tiny figure wearing a minuscule vest of stitched-together leaves. Even as her heart pounded, Dahlia tried to rationalize this. Perhaps it was a newly discovered insect. Then it tilted its head up at her, revealing a face. A small, expressive face with curious eyes that blinked with intelligence. Dahlia let out a startled gasp. Her mind ran back to old memories. When she was 6 years old, she swore she saw the garden gnome by the hydrangeas wink at her. Was her imagination flaring up again? In a swirl of panic and excitement, Dahlia rubbed her eyes as if that action might wake her from a dream. She half expected that once her vision cleared, the creature would be gone. Instead, it was still there, still observing her with a wide-eyed fascination. Overhead, the canopy rustled in gentle approval, as if the trees themselves were saying, "You see us now, truly see us." Before she could form any words, the small figure fluttered its wings, a shimmering movement of emerald and silver, and drifted closer to her leg. She swallowed hard, simultaneously wanting to take a step back and draw nearer to this impossible sight. Before Dahlia could decide, she miscalculated her own movements and nearly lost her footing on the uneven cobblestone. She lurched, her arms flying out in an attempt to balance, and felt herself start to tumble backward. But at the very last second, something coiled around her waist and gently straightened her upright. Trying to catch her breath, Dahlia looked down and saw a slender, sinewy branch from one of the red maples wrapped protectively around her, as if it were an arm offering support. Time seemed to stretch. The branch gradually withdrew, leaving Dahlia stable on her feet once more. Her gaze traveled up the trunk of the tree, whose bark was ridged and flecked with lichen. The branch remained motionless, simply another limb of the grand maple. Yet Dahlia's heart soared with the certainty that it had moved in the moment she needed help. For a moment, she stood there in awed silence, uncertain whether to speak words of thanks. Finally, she managed to mumble, "Thank you," under her breath. The tree didn't respond, but somehow she felt a quiet acceptance emanating from its leaves. Breathing in short, quick bursts, Dahlia turned her attention back to the tiny, winged figures. For now she realized there were several, hovering in the soft light that filtered through the trees. Each one varied slightly. Some wore tunics woven from grass, others draped themselves in petals plucked from rare forest blooms. Their wings came in every imaginable shape, from slender and translucent to broad and vividly patterned with luminous streaks. One in particular soared closer than the rest. Unlike the others, this fairy, if that was truly what it was, had wings tinted a gradient of gold, as though they had been brushed with sunlight itself. She wore a gown of soft, buttercup yellow silk that fluttered around her tiny ankles. Her hair, a warm shade of walnut brown, swirled in the breeze, framing a graceful, delicate face. Dahlia stared, mouth slightly open, forgetting even to blink for a moment. "Greetings," said the winged woman in a voice as light as a distant flute. Dahlia's astonishment only grew. She hadn't expected the fairies to speak. Somehow, the earlier tug on her clothes had seemed the kind of communication they preferred. But here she was, hearing words. Quiet, melodic, and heartfelt. "Welcome to our haven," the fairy continued, inclining her head in a gesture of respect. "I am Serafina. You must be here for a reason, or perhaps our wise forest guardians brought you through." The other fairies looked on, flickering around Dahlia with an air of wonder. She realized they might be as curious about her as she was about them. They floated in small clusters, whispering amongst themselves in hushed, musical voices that Dahlia couldn't quite decipher. Some shot the tall trees disapproving glances as if to scold them. "How could you let a human pass our defenses?" Others offered Dahlia faint smiles, more intrigued than alarmed. Dahlia struggled to form a coherent sentence. Her voice finally surfaced in a hush. I'm sorry. I don't know how I found this place. I was just taking a walk." Her gaze drifted to the large clock set into a building in the distance. Even though she was only glimpsing it from afar, she recognized the shape of a clock face. She could almost see the hands ticking away. "I think I should go soon," she continued. "My mother will be worried." Serafina gave her a thoughtful nod, wings shimmering as she hovered at Dahlia's eye level. The forest seldom misjudges a guest. You wouldn't have gotten this far unless you were meant to. But if time is calling you back, then we understand. Perhaps there will be another day. She smiled gently, the corners of her eyes crinkling with kindness. At her signal, two smaller fairies with wings shaped like maple seeds took Dahlia's hands, albeit only able to grip a couple of her fingers each, and began guiding her back along the cobblestone path. Dahlia moved with them, partly because she didn't know what else to do, and partly because a warm swirl of awe still pulsed in her heart. She shot one last glance over her shoulder, hoping to capture a mental picture of the tiny village that lay beyond the maples. What Dahlia had seen in that quick moment was no less than a miniature town, dwellings seemingly carved from twigs, leaves, and stones, arranged around a central courtyard. Over it all shone a radiant sun that felt more like high summer than the chilly autumn outside. The presence of two willow trees had formed a natural arch, and their long, draping branches served as a kind of green curtain between this enchanted world and the forest beyond. Had Dahlia crossed fully into that domain, she might have discovered a shift in the air's temperature, a swirl of fragrant breezes, and the lively hum of countless fairies pursuing their daily tasks. But she only had a fleeting impression, like pressing one's face to a window and then stepping away. The memory, though short, glowed in her mind like an ember of pure magic. As the fairies led her back, the corridor of red maples seemed shorter somehow, as if the forest was gently nudging her home. No one spoke. Dahlia didn't have the energy to speak anyway. Her thoughts were racing with more wonder than she had ever felt in her life. It was like stepping into a storybook, only to have that storybook come alive around you, acknowledging your presence. Finally, the smooth stones gave way to soft earth again. The towering maples parted, revealing the familiar autumn foliage Dahlia recognized, a ground littered with russet and ochre leaves, damp from lingering morning dew. She turned to wave goodbye, but the fairies remained at the very edge of their domain, hovering in a gentle cluster. Seraphina offered her a final nod as though to say, "We'll be here when the time is right." And with that, they withdrew. Dahlia found herself treading the long familiar woodland path that led back to the village. The late afternoon sky had deepened toward dusk. She had never realized how tiring wonder could be. Her legs felt heavy, and her mind buzzed with 1,000 recollections. She passed boulders strewn with crimson leaves, and her breath lingered in the nippy air. By the time she reached the edge of her family's property, she could see the warm glow of the lamps in the windows. Her mother's silhouette moved across the living room, setting out plates for dinner. When Dahlia walked through the front door, Marina greeted her with a concerned smile. "It's nearly time to eat. You're a bit late," her mother chided softly, but there was affection in her eyes. Dahlia murmured an apology. She wasn't sure how to explain her delay. Part of her wanted to blurt out everything: the living trees, the cobblestone path, the tiny guardians with wings of fire and starlight. Yet something in her felt the world would not understand. Her mother would likely smile, then dismiss it as daydreaming. Dahlia also felt a sense of protectiveness for what she had discovered, as though it was not just her story to tell. Over the meal, pasta with a savory mushroom sauce, Dahlia spoke little. She gave vague answers about wandering deeper into the woods to watch the leaves and enjoy the crisp air. Marina occasionally pressed for details, but Dahlia offered gentle evasion. She felt a fluttering in her chest, a bit like the wings of the fairies that had tugged her along the cobblestone path. Later that evening, her mother suggested she take a warm bath to chase away the chill. Dahlia agreed, nodding absent-mindedly, her mind still half lost in the hidden forest village. Steam curled around her in the tub as Dahlia washed away bits of leaves and twigs that had lodged in her hair during her ramble. Now and then, she found herself pausing to gaze at her reflection in the bath's rippling water. She half expected to see something different about herself after her encounter. Maybe a glimmer in her eyes or a leaf-like marking on her skin that proved the day's events were real. But she saw only her usual features, tinted pink by the warmth of the water. After bathing, Dahlia dried off, put on her coziest pajamas, sky blue with scattered little stars, and padded to her bedroom. The walls were painted a soft lavender color, dotted with glow-in-the-dark stickers that resembled constellations at night. She placed her phone on the bedside table, realizing she'd never once thought to take it out and snap a picture of the fairy realm. The idea made her chuckle. Would her camera have even captured anything, or would it just have shown a cluster of trees? Slipping under the covers, Dahlia felt exhaustion settle into her muscles. The day had taken more energy than she'd realized. The window beside her bed revealed a moonlit sky, and the North Star gleamed faintly among a crowd of distant constellations. She wondered if somewhere in the forest, the fairies were perched beneath that same sky, sprinkling fairy dust across their tiny lawns, or weaving new homes from the leaves that fell each night. She remembered the friendly wave of the maple branch, the gentle voice of Seraphina, and the hush of the cobblestone walkway. A sense of peace enfolded her. The world was far larger and more enchanting than she had ever dared imagine. Tomorrow it might seem like a dream, but she knew in her heart's core it had been real. Wrapping her quilt around her shoulders, Dahlia let out a contented sigh. She flicked off her bedside lamp, allowing moonlight to drape across the bedroom floor in silvery swaths. Her final thought before drifting off was a certainty. She would return to the forest as soon as she could. Maybe not the very next day, but soon. She needed to see if the trees would welcome her again, or if the cobblestone path would reappear. And, above all, she yearned to rediscover that realm, to learn more about the fairies whose lives were woven into the tapestry of the woodland. That night, Dahlia's dreams were a vivid tapestry of swaying branches and dancing lights. She saw silhouettes of slender trees gliding along hidden pathways, leaves swirling in circles around her. She saw the small village, its tiny stone buildings bathed in a soft glow as fireflies hovered like sentinels. She dreamt of Serafina beckoning to her from the edge of a pond, whispering words Dahlia couldn't quite decipher. When Dahlia drew closer, the reflection in the water displayed not Dahlia, but a shimmering figure with translucent wings, as if the forest had adopted her into its magic. She awoke with the memory of these dreams vividly etched in her mind. Slivers of morning sun peeked under the curtains, revealing the cozy purple walls of her bedroom. For a second, she half expected to be back on the cobblestones, feeling that summer-like warmth emanating from hidden corners of the woodland. She blinked at the morning's hush, birds tweeting outside her window. Yet the lingering sense of awe from her dream told her it was more than just an illusion. Downstairs, the sense of fresh toast and scrambled eggs wafted into the hallway, and Dahlia could hear her mother humming a light tune as she went about preparing breakfast. With an odd mixture of excitement and longing, Dahlia got up and got dressed, choosing a comfortable sweater and jeans. She took an extra moment to run a brush through her hair, still half expecting to find a stray leaf from the day before. At breakfast, Marina commented on how thoughtful Dahlia seemed. Dahlia only smiled, letting her mind wander back to the village of the fairies. In the bright clarity of morning, she was more certain than ever. Magic existed, and it was closer to her home than she could have ever guessed. Far from Dahlia's cozy kitchen, the fairy realm stirred with early morning energy. Its inhabitants carried out daily rituals that had been repeated for generations. Some fairies ventured into the denser parts of the forest, tending to seedlings, sprinkling them with shimmering pollens that accelerated growth. Others collected dew from the underside of broad leaves, storing it in dainty glass vials for use in healing potions or to keep the soil rich with nutrients. Still others specialized in caring for injured woodland creatures, bandaging sprained wings, or removing splinters from tiny paws. In a series of winding tunnels beneath mighty oak roots lived yet another group of forest guardians, those who preferred quiet darkness and the sweet aroma of damp earth. They were responsible for aerating the soil, ensuring roots could spread easily, and making sure that no part of the forest grew too wild or too bare. The fairies believed that every inch of land deserved love and balance. Through it all, Serafina remained watchful. As one of the elder fairies, her wings had a distinct shimmer that bespoke both wisdom and power. She oversaw the younger fairies' tasks, helped them with special magical endeavors, and consulted with the tallest maples about changes in the seasons. She had felt an unmistakable spark the day Dahlia stumbled into their midst. Serafina sensed that Dahlia's arrival was no accident. The forest had recognized something in that curious, warm-hearted girl. The very next day, Dahlia found herself gazing out her bedroom window toward the forest, a swirl of questions rattling in her head. Should she go back right away? Would the path reappear if she merely walked the same route? Or was it a rare occurrence that couldn't be forced? At lunch, Marina teased her, saying, "You're awfully quiet today. Did the autumn wind steal your voice?" Dahlia forced a laugh, but said nothing of her secret. she could hardly talk about invisible portals or living trees in a casual manner. After finishing her meal, she excused herself and ventured outside. The day's light was crisp, the sky a wide expanse of pale blue dotted with feathery clouds. Dahlia stood for a moment at the edge of the yard, listening. She could hear the usual bustle, neighbors chatting, crows cawing in the distance. But deeper in the forest, she thought she detected a whisper. Could it be the rustling of leaves, or was it something more purposeful, more aware? She hesitated at first, then took a step onto the path she knew so well. The canopy overhead glowed with warm reds and browns, while the ground below was scattered with a fresh layer of leaves. Yet there was no immediate sign of cobblestone or magical lights. Still, she pressed on, occasionally lifting her gaze to the overhead tapestry of branches. After a quarter-mile or so, Dahlia came upon a bend in the trail marked by a mossy boulder. She recognized it as a familiar landmark, a turning point where she would typically decide whether to continue deeper or circle back. She paused here, placing one palm against the rough texture of the stone, feeling the cool moisture seep into her skin. Then, with a renewed sense of determination, she pressed forward. If the forest was going to show her that hidden path again, she wanted to be ready. But there was only the hush of an ordinary woodland. Squirrels darted between tree trunks, burying acorns for the winter ahead. The wind hissed softly, shaking a flurry of leaves that drifted lazily toward the ground. After an hour of meandering, Dahlia realized that she wasn't going to find the entrance to the fairy realm simply by wishing for it. She felt a pang of disappointment, but also acceptance. Magic followed its own schedule, not hers. She returned home empty-handed, but full of hope that one day soon the forest might invite her back. Unseen by Dahlia, the forest truly was alive, aware of every footprint she left behind. In secret corners and hidden hollows, the guardians conferred with the trees who swayed and arched their branches in silent consultation. The barrier that kept humans away from the fairy community was woven from ancient spells, from the deep essence of the soil, and from the loyalty of the woodland. It adjusted itself constantly, deciding when to open a passage and when to seal it shut, much like a living puzzle meant to test a wanderer's heart. Some nights, if Dahlia were to stand quietly on her porch and peer into the darkness, she might see faint flickers of dancing lights in the distance, fireflies, or so she would tell herself. And in those flickers, the fairies would be at play, celebrating a successful day of caring for saplings or coaxing new mushrooms to grow. Sometimes, if the moon was high, these miniature revelries lasted until dawn, the fairies' laughter echoing in the hush of midnight. As weeks passed, Dahlia's daily life resumed its ordinary rhythm, helping her mother with chores, going to the local school, dreaming of new sketches for her drawing pad. She continued her routine of afternoon walks, letting the crisp air fill her lungs and the autumn light fill her soul. Every time she passed that bend near the mossy boulder, she felt a tiny pulse of excitement, a reminder of that unforgettable day when her footprints led her to places that existed only in bedtime stories and daydreams. However, the path remained elusive. Leaves fell, swirling in mesmerizing shapes, gradually forming a blanket of vibrant color across the forest floor. The trees themselves started shedding more fervently, branches taking on a bare skeletal quality as winter neared. Dahlia told herself, perhaps in the spring the realm of the fairies would open once more. Or maybe it would be many years before the forest unlocked that gate again. The memory of the cobblestone path grew more dreamlike, yet she clung to it, replaying it in her mind each night. Meanwhile, in the hidden village behind the willow curtain, Seraphina and her fellow fairies continued their timeless tasks. They toiled with unwavering devotion, swirling healing powders around the roots of the oldest trees. They orchestrated the harmonious interplay of insects and blossoms. They ensured the forest's heartbeat remained strong. And, in the back of her mind, Seraphina kept thoughts of the human girl with warm eyes and unwavering curiosity. She wondered when the forest might decide to let Dahlia return. When the final leaves dropped, winter arrived in earnest, draping the village and its surrounding territory in a chill hush. Dahlia, swathed in scarves and mittens, would occasionally venture into the woods, marveling at the icy crystals that rimmed branches and grasses. Her footprints in the snow appeared lonely, yet they never truly were. The forest watched her with quiet affection, biding its time. Each night, Dahlia would settle into her bed, close her eyes, and feel a surge of longing for that summery haven she had glimpsed on the other side of the willow curtain. In her most vibrant dreams, she walked once more upon the cobblestones, heard the ticking of that ancient clock embedded in the little stone building, and felt the sun's warmth even though the real world was blanketed by frost. Though she couldn't see it, Dahlia believed with every fiber of her being that the fairies were still there, living their small but purposeful lives. Somehow, that knowledge brought her comfort, reminding her that the world was filled with more possibilities than she had ever understood before. She felt no need to rush the forest's magic. Just knowing it existed was enough to make her heart flutter. Thus, Dahlia's life settled into a beautiful equilibrium, a mixture of everyday tasks and shimmering hope that extraordinary wonders lay just out of sight. She carried the memory of tiny hands tugging at her sleeve, the lingering echo of Seraphina's gentle greeting, and the vivid recollection of trees coming alive to save her from a fall. It was a memory too profound to share casually, too marvelous to dismiss. Now and then, she would pause on her way to school, looking back toward the forest's edge. A smile would touch her lips as she imagined, in the rustle of branches, the faint laugh of a fairy, or the hush of a tree quietly saying her name. And, in those moments, her heart would sing with the anticipation of a future day. Perhaps not tomorrow, perhaps not next week, when she would cross the threshold once more, guided by the living forest to the small kingdom that sparkled with life at the core of those ancient woods. Inside that kingdom, the fairies went about their duties, secure in the knowledge that nature itself was their ally. They cared for seed, leaf, and root, forging a bond with the forest that spanned countless generations. And whenever they recalled the human child who had unexpectedly wandered their way, they felt a warmth in their tiny hearts. The forest had allowed her passage for a reason. Whatever that reason might be, it would certainly blossom in its own time, like a hidden seed sleeping beneath the snow, patiently waiting for the first gentle rains of spring to coax it into bloom. For Dahlia, that day remained a thrilling whisper in the corridors of her mind, proof that magic, in all its silent splendor, existed beyond the threshold of human understanding. She would never forget the moment a tree branch saved her from falling, or the marvel of seeing an entire village made of leaves and pebbles shining under an otherworldly sun. And each night, as she drifted off to sleep, a tiny part of her soul wandered back to that hidden realm, cradled by the knowledge that the woods held secrets as ancient as time itself. Secrets that might one day invite her to walk the cobblestone path again.